I want to get into running back handcuffs that could help bolster your roster over the rest of the season. First guy I want to talk about is Emanuel Wilson. So obviously he's 68% rostered because Josh Jacobs was out this week. And I think I want to highlight how good he was and how impactful some of these guys can be, because he took 28 carries for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 26 half PPR points this week. So he obviously is one of the top end handcuffs. Hopefully, if you have Josh Jacobs, this was a week where you were playing Emanuel Wilson. But if he was swooped off the waiver wire, definitely keep an eye out if he does get cut in your leagues as Jacobs comes back, because this is somebody that you want to add to your bench as soon as you can if you're a Josh Jacobs. Next guy up is Devin Neal. So we saw Alvin Kamara get hurt with a knee injury. He did not return in this game, so I'm kind of looping this in with waiver wire a little bit. But Devin Neal is somebody that we've talked about in the past. Coming out of the bye week, he immediately had a bigger role when Kamara went down, and so we saw him get 7 carries, but we also saw him have 5 catches for 43 yards. So now that Tyler Shuck is the quarterback, he had a pretty bad game this week against Atlanta, but the schedule does lighten up a little bit after this. And if it is going to be Devin Neal and he's going to get anywhere close to 7 targets in the passing game, I think that there's a role here for him to be relatively productive. So stay tuned with Kamara's injury, but this is somebody too that could be taking on more and more of a role anyways, even when Kamara comes back. So I do think that he's worth an add this week, especially going up against Miami next week. He's going to be a hot waiver wire. The next handcuff I want to bring you is Dylan Sampson. So we saw Quinshon Judkins get banged up in this game, but he did return, but not before Dylan Sampson had a long touchdown reception. So he had kind of a breakout game again this week. You know, he had that week 1 performance when Judkins was out where he was awesome. And then he had a 50-plus yard touchdown reception in this one with Shedeur Sanders. So the offense looked better this week under Sanders. Now that could definitely be a little bit of the opponent, right? They've got the Raiders. But I do think that if Sampson is going to have any sort of expanded role, he's already showed 2 different games where he has been productive when Judkins was not out there. So if you have Judkins, we talked about trading for Judkins because of how good the schedule was. And I think if Sampson does have to step in, he'll be an immediate top 20 running back, an immediate starter. So I do think he is worth picking up. Only 11% rostered, especially if you have Judkins. Next guy is a fantasy football darling from a couple years ago, and it's Raheem Mostert. So I wanted to bring him up because Ashton Genty got hurt in this game, and I believe he came back, but it was at least a little bit encouraging to see Mostert get out there for a few snaps, had a couple carries, had a couple catches, and you know, this offensive line is brutal, so it's not like he's going to be necessarily good, even in good matchups. But if you've been relying on Ashton Genty, I think that Raheem Mostert is almost a must add with this injury. And you know, making space at this point in the year, check out your week 14 buys, because nobody's on bye next week, but your week 14 buys could line up where you need players or something like that. But if you don't have a bye week issue, I definitely think that's another reason you should be starting to stockpile some of these names. So if you're an Ashton Genty owner, you've been relying on him, Mostert is going to be somebody that could be hot off the wire this week because of the injury. The next group of guys is not related to injury, so we're going to start that off with Kyle Monangai. He's 63% rostered, so he's obviously been in a growing role, and I do think that he showed out again, scored again this week, and Swift fumbled in this game and only had 2 carries after that. It was all Monangai after Swift's fumble. So we'll see if that carries over into next week or into the rest of the season. But the other reason I had Monangai a little bit lower here is because the schedule is just really tough for running backs for Chicago. So they get Philly next week, then Green Bay, then Cleveland, then Green Bay again. So the next month is going to be brutal for the Bears. It's going to really test them because they do have a really good record. And so, you know, some of these games are going to be difficult, but if they show out, then I think we could maybe have a serious playoff contender here. And I think Monangai is going to be a big part of that. So at this point in the year, I think Monangai needs to be 100% owned, especially if you have Swift and he's still out there. You definitely need to make it a priority to get him onto your teams. Next name up is Tyler Allgeier, and this one might be the most obvious one in all of fantasy football. Because if Bijan Robinson goes down, he is going to be an immediate impact player. With Kirk Cousins at the helm the rest of the year, I think the offense overall is going to be a little bit worse, but I don't think that would impact Tyler Allgeier getting all of the work if anything were to happen to Bijan. Get him on your rosters. I'm actually surprised to see he's only 51% rostered. He should be 100% rostered because Bijan owners should be falling over themselves to get him onto their bench at this point in the year. So definitely with the schedule too, that lines up. It's the Jets, Seattle, not a great one, but then Tampa Bay, Arizona, and the Rams. Those first two playoff matchups are very good. So if anything, again, were to happen to Bijan, then Allgeier is next man up, top 20 running back in any sort of situation like that. As a Jaylen Warren truther, it hurts me to put Gainwell on here, but that's where we're at because he showed out again this week, 10 carries, 92 yards, 6 receptions for 30 yards. He did not score, right? They had the fake tush push where he got 55 yards. It looked like it was a touchdown. Then they marked him down at the 1 and Warren got the touchdown, but overall, last week he was awesome. This week he was awesome. I don't think at this point in the year they're looking to take him off the field. They don't have any consistent pass catchers, so anything that they can get from both running backs, especially in the passing game out of Gainwell, right? That's kind of been Jaylen Warren's calling card in the past. So it is surprising to see that he was just completely uninvolved this last week in the passing game. But with how well Gainwell's been playing in that area, I can't really blame them for continuing to roll him out there. So he's getting all the third down work. And I think that he should be in flex consideration moving forward. And we've already seen him have 2 monster games when Jaylen Warren was not there, right? The game where they went to Europe, and then last week when Warren went down in the second half and Gainwell just went nuts. So he might be one of the most valuable handcuffs in all of fantasy just because we've seen it from him. And he gets Miami in that first week of the playoffs. So if anything happens to Warren long-term, Gainwell can step in and be an impact player the first week of the playoffs. Now he gets Detroit and Cleveland the following 2 weeks. Detroit, maybe not so difficult of a matchup that you would want to avoid, but Cleveland might be. Overall, though, Gainwell is somebody that you want on your team. Christian McCaffrey has beat the allegations so far this year, but we do know that he is injury prone. I would definitely recommend trying to get Brian Robinson Jr. on your teams. And this one's a little bit tougher because it's a week 14 bye. So if you have McCaffrey and you're looking to add Robinson, that's 2 spots dedicated to a team that is going to be on bye in week 14. So definitely check your roster that week before making this move. But 35% of teams are already holding Brian Robinson Jr. And you have to think that those are the McCaffrey owners that are just paranoid still. And so I think it's still a good idea too, because we have been beating the drum with how good of a schedule the 49ers have in the playoffs. It's Tennessee, Indy, and Chicago. There might not be a better playoff schedule than that for a running back. So if McCaffrey goes down and Brian Robinson Jr. is out there, that's going to be blow your fab type of move. So get him early if you can. I would recommend everybody try and get Brian Robinson Jr. on their teams just because of the schedule and because of the possible impact. Next running back up is Blake Corum, and he's definitely gotten more of a role over the last month than he ever had before. But I don't know how impactful he'd be if anything were to happen to Kyron, just because Kyron has relied heavily on touchdowns, and obviously he's been very good. But the offense is clearly running through Matthew Stafford. He is throwing so much. He's throwing all of the touchdowns to the goal line play. The goal line fade to Devontae Adams is just completely and totally unstoppable. He has what feels like a touchdown on that every single week. And so it's not even necessarily like he'd be getting in from the goal line all the time. So this one, he would be startable, obviously. If you have Kyron, you're definitely relying on him in your starting lineups. But this one, I'm a little less convinced this one would be a major impact to the playoff schedule, right? You get Detroit in week 1 again, not the worst matchup, but not the best matchup. Seattle, that's not a great matchup. And then Atlanta again. So overall, Corum is somebody that if you're relying on Kyron, you probably would like to have and get ahead of that before Kyron gets hurt. But overall, not somebody that if I don't have Kyron that I'm really looking to at this point. We've been recommending Tuten for a while now, so it is a little bit tough to continue to bring him up and see his roster percentage not really move at all. But I do think that Tuten is somebody that needs to be rostered everywhere. And ETN had another good game this week, so it is a little bit iffy, and he was coming off an injury. But you see the Jets, Denver, and Indy. That's 2 very good matchups and 1 not so good matchup in the playoffs. And so if ETN were to go down and all of this work was consolidated into Tuten for any amount of time, I think he could have a very big impact on the playoffs if it is all him. So he's rostered in about half of the leagues. So if you have ETN and you're still holding on to a second defense or somebody like Keon Coleman or, Jacoby Myers, anybody like that, I'd be making a move to kind of secure that Travis Etienne spot. James Cook has been very dominant this year, so it is a little bit difficult to try to say Ray Davis is the next guy up, but I did want to mention him just because Ty Johnson has been pretty involved in the offense on passing downs, and there might be people out there that think he would be the next man up if anything were to happen to James Cook, but we've seen it last year where that was not the case. Ray Davis is the one that steps into James Cook's role, and Ty Johnson's role is kind of unaffected. So that boom week where he catches a long touchdown or doesn't get a lot of targets, that's kind of Ty Johnson's role, and Ray Davis would get the early down work and would still get early down targets. So, do I think Ray Davis is going to have an impact? Probably not. He did score on a return last week, but I just don't think that this is somebody that you have to chase. This is somebody where maybe you have in the back of your mind, if you have James Cook, to save some additional fab. Don't be spending fab on defenses. Don't be spending fab on, the latest waiver wire guy. And keep in mind that you might need to go after Davis if something happens to James Cook. But if you don't have the roster spot for him, I totally understand leaving. And the last handcuff I want to talk about in this video is Tank Bigsby. So this was honestly a surprise to me because when the trade happened, sending him from Jacksonville to the Eagles, it was under the pretense that Will Shipley's role would not be affected. But then Shipley got hurt. Bigsby got a little bit of more of an opportunity. And that led to him kind of taking the number 2 running back spot from Shipley. So if you have Saquon Barkley and you've been holding Shipley, or you have Saquon and you want to just kind of ensure that spot, I would go ahead and add Tank Bigsby. But we've seen how Saquon's played this year, and it has not been what we expected. He's more of a running back too. So if Bigsby were getting that same workload, I don't have any confidence whatsoever that he would be better than Saquon. And so, that probably means that he's in the mid 20s at running back at best. And the chances that he does end up splitting with Shipley, if something were to happen to Saquon, I think are pretty high. So that leaves Bigsby in this weird spot where I probably wouldn't even bother handcuffing Saquon, just because I don't think that there's anything clear as to what would happen if he does go down with injury. So I did want to highlight Bigsby though, because he is new on the team, and if you've been following, obviously he's kind of taken over as the number 2, but there might be a lot of people out there that didn't realize that. All right, and with that, thank you guys for listening. Subscribe if you're still here, and we'll talk to you in the next one.